Ready.
Hello. I am still hearing the birds singing. Hello, everybody. Welcome to the second day of our conversation about intergenerational and transdisciplinarity as we think about the future of universities. My name is Peter Whitehouse, and my colleague Sylvanus, the tree doctor who presented yesterday, will be here only in spirit, but you will meet the spirit later. So I want to just begin by sharing the screen of let me make sure I'm sharing with you all, sharing the screen about the topic. And this is from the initial session yesterday, where we started with a lecture, basically an interactive experience. But I wanted to start, as I did yesterday, by expressing gratitude to many people, and begin with a land acknowledgement, something increasingly being used in different places. I'm at Case Western Reserve University, and I'm not going to read this land acknowledgement because each one of you can be thinking about the land that you were on. For example, this conference was originally to be at the Museum of Anthropology in Mexico, where obviously there are a lot of indigenous peoples that have occupied that land. I also want to add to this land acknowledgement an acknowledgement of the land itself, that is to say, of the non-human creatures that live on this land, including Sylvanus would want me to point out, the tree doctor of trees. And again, gratitude to the people here, Julieta, who's organized this fantastic conference with others like Marco providing technical support, and Florent Pasquier, who was with us on Wednesday for his wonderful introduction to the process. He is the president of CIRET. You will be hearing from our InterHub team. Patrick will be doing Zoom again. David Blake Willis will be helping those of you on YouTube field your questions and bring them into our space here. You'll be hearing again from Maria, Genné, Parka, Linnea, Tom, and the Kairos Alive Dance Company. And Richard Gere, who was with us yesterday, did our Renga, we made a collective poem together. Thank you to the panelists I will introduce you to and the audience. Here's what we did yesterday. I'm not going to review that, but that was, sorry, not yesterday, Wednesday. That was what I just mentioned, to introduce you to InterHub. I want to introduce you to InterHub today as well, just so people know which is the organization that's arranging this. These are the kinds of things we talked about yesterday. How do the words come together in stories to create a wisdom that will allow us to thrive as a human species in these challenging times? The InterHub is the former Intergenerational Schools International. It is part of the Presencing Institute, which comes out of the MIT Center for Organizational Learning as part of their Global Activation of Intention and Action product. So this is our focus in InterHub, Intergenerational and Transdisciplinary Futuring. It's a very diverse international group that has a lot of indigenous peoples and people from all around the world who really want to change society. Yeah. Yes?
Thanks for positively embarrassing me also, as we like to say in the center.
I'm sorry, I'm hearing a voice. let me just continue and ask people to mute. We'll have the opportunity for conversation in a minute. So just to finish up on InterHub, there are lots of different hubs in this project. Our hub focuses on these two words we'll be talking about more: intergenerational and transdisciplinary. This is today. You will be hearing from people from around the world around the notion that lifelong learning in universities has a future that we need to design together. And I also want to end, before I show you the agenda for today, by saying there are lots of other activities coming forward this month and throughout the summer. So if you want to join us, you can connect with us. I'll put my email in the chat. So this is we're not doing this could be called a timeline for what we're going to do for the next three hours. But on Wednesday, we resisted the idea that we exist on a line, going from past to present to future. So I introduced this notion of a tesseract. Many of you may not know that word. It comes from mathematics, from the Greek, and it means a cube, a box that flies through time. And so the idea that when you think outside the box, you need to think outside different boxes in different times. And that is such an appropriate metaphor for this conference, where we are all in different places, even some in different times, and some will be participating later. So welcome everybody on YouTube, on Zoom, who are here now and will be here later. We wish to also invite Kairos Alive to help us make these transitions between past, present, and future. Kairos, as Christiana, one of our members from Greece, will tell us, is a word that asks us to think differently about time. So with that, I will stop sharing the screen and ask our four panelists to come on in an order that they will determine themselves, to share a story of their lives in academics from the past that they believe tells us something about them and the thoughts they have will be developed for the future. So I'm just realizing it's gentlemen. What a terrible problem we have this morning already. By the way, welcome Jerry, and welcome others who've joined us from Internet. So who would like to go first for the story?
I'd be happy to share, Peter.
Thank you, Jonathan.
Of course. So my name is Jonathan Beever. I'm an associate professor of philosophy at the University of Central Florida, outside of Orlando. And I've been in philosophy now for enough time that I've got some older stories to share. And I wanted to share with you a story from my very first philosophy class, because it was really formative to the way I look at universities and my role in them. And also, more importantly to me, maybe right now, the nature of the humanities in general. So when I was an undergraduate, decades ago now, there was a full professor in my very small department at the University of Maine, in the very northeast of the US, our state land and sea grant institution, where I did my undergraduate degree. We had a very small philosophy department that met in an old wooden 2-story building on campus. And this professor had had a lifetime of experience, but every day he would come to class and he almost exclusively taught introduction to philosophy. So first year courses for new students to the university from across disciplines. And his approach was that he would come to class every session, whether it's 3 days a week or 2 days a week or daily, as a different philosopher. So he would embody, say, Plato, or he would embody Kierkegaard one day, and he would take on the persona of these famous philosophers and engage in dialogue about that philosopher's ideas with this group of students who frankly knew nothing about philosophy or backgrounds. And his connection to the world of ideas generally was vigorous, in the sense that it was full of vigor. And he connected me to this world of ideas, to this genealogy of ideas, in this incredibly rich way that stimulated the entirety of my career to date. And while he was doing that, I learned later not very much later. While he was doing that in the classroom every day, he was also fighting what was a terminal cancer. And he passed away just a couple of years after I graduated. And so he would come to class every day ill, very ill. And yet that vigor never left. And he engaged this group of students from, again, across disciplines, whether we were biologists or engineers or young philosophy majors, and he would share with us the perspective of these figures that embodied these ideals and ideas that shape the world. And this sort of passion for the history of ideas has stuck with me. And there's lots of sort of formative outcomes from that we can discuss later on. I'll just mention them briefly now, but it introduced me to the difference between intimate, engaged, small classes in the humanities, like an honors college model in the US academic structure, versus the large courses that we see now. But also it first shaped my thinking, which has maintained itself across my research trajectory, about the importance of relations. That none of us think, value, perceive, introspect, or understand in isolation. Everything we do is through our relations. So as a philosopher now, I'm continually shaped by this thinking. I'm applying it to work in bioethics and environmental ethics specifically, but I'm thinking about the genealogies of ideas and the concept of interdependence more generally. And Peter, you're still muted, but that's the end of my story.
Yeah, thank you, Jonathan. How lovely. And I'm sure those ideas will be built on. Let me just say that I get in this chat, in the YouTube chat, there's some sound quality issues in YouTube. I'm also going to actually take the prerogative of building on your story. Jonathan and I have a relationship, and I mentioned that Sylvanus, the tree doctor who asks us to think about health from the perspective of trees, his spirit is going to be with us today. His spirit, or a tree spirit, is called a dryad. His name is Potter. The story begins when I started studying ethics from the perspective of a physician. And in fact, I became a professor of bioethics. But I did things backwards, because after being a professor for a while, I decided to take a master's degree in bioethics, and then I left the Department of Bioethics, kind of an inverted order. And the reason I left was I met the man who invented the word bioethics, Van Rensselaer Potter. And Jonathan knows this because he and I have written about Potter, the man who invented the word bioethics. His classic book is Bioethics, A Bridge to the Future. And he was inspired by land. He was inspired by Aldo Leopold, a land ethicist. So his idea of ethics was very, very different than the way mainstream bioethics has come, because it's rooted in the land, it's rooted in nature. And Potter died a remarkable death in a way that's another story, but he left an impression on me that I always felt he was sitting here on my left shoulder, a mentor of significant power, that his spirit is still with me. And in fact, when I became a tree doctor, Potter's spirit of land ethics, of appreciation of nature, has stayed with me. So the name of the tree doctor's Dryadic spirit is my mentor, Potter.
Well, I guess we're still introducing ourselves, right? So I should just jump in. Is that okay? My name is Matt Kaplan. I'm on the faculty at Penn State University in University Park, Pennsylvania, smack in the middle of Pennsylvania. And there's some stories. Too bad I could only choose one. I wanted to start with my upbringing. Being born and raised in probably the most multicultural, heavily studied communities in the world, which is the Lower East Side of New York, where you could see Ellis Island and so on. But I'm going to instead just talk about my senior year in college. I went to State University of New York at Stony Brook as a senior. I had the chance to go to London on a foreign studies program called Environmental Design, developed by Len Krasner, who basically had an early career as one of the leaders of behavior modification. It was all about behavioral engineering and token economies, and he was really up there. And at some point, he had a transformation. He decided that it wasn't life purpose wasn't about influencing behavior, but it was empowering people to find out how they want to live, to choose their own consequences, their own stimuli in their environments. So this program in London basically had us go there with no rules, no structure, no nothing. And we had to design the course the year long, looking at how people can design utopian environments for themselves. And it was quite a transformation, because earlier than that, I was just so proud of myself for figuring out how to get an A in all my classes. And here it is, we're in the middle of having to come up with an understanding not only of learning, but institutional trappings that may confine our learning. But it was really like a university without walls. So it was quite stimulating. And all of us came up with group projects after we eventually got comfortable with the openness of the experience. And I think at that point, it really opened my horizons to different ways of living, learning, and caring for people. And it's from there, experiences like Interhub are kind of similar, all about process, all about people figuring out how to move forward without a constricted structure to begin with. So at any rate, that's my story. Thank you.
I can add on about a story about the Open University. My name is Mark Turner, and I'm technically in the Department of Cognitive Science at Case Western Reserve University. But I've spent most of my life studying human communication, linguistics, gesture, multimodal communication, with the usual disciplinary techniques. And the usual disciplinary techniques mean getting examples, coming up with an idea, analyzing them, pretty much alone, talking to other people over coffee, other professors say, what do you think about this? Reading books. And after some years, writing up an article and publishing it. And that was sort of it. There was some attempt to unify people through conferences and to get more data by having concordances. And I did a lot of that sort of thing, but I was quite frustrated because the data were largely not shared. The analysis was largely not shared except for a summary in articles. Resulted in a kind of a small field. It was almost impossible for students to get into this field because you really had to have an individual mentor or director who in a apprentice-like fashion connected you, but the students couldn't afford to go to the conferences where a lot of the work was being done. You also spent a tremendous amount of your valuable time just amassing data. One linguist expressed this as a Rolls Royce being used as a wheelbarrow. And the amassing of the data was sort of hit and miss. And so I wanted to know what to do about this. And I visited a lot of independent centers and institutes for research. So I went to the Institute for Advanced Study at Princeton and the National Humanities Center and the Wissenschaftskolleg zu Berlin and the Center for Advanced Study at Durham and other places. And I was looking for an idea because these places would pull people together for a while and they could work on things. I thought, okay, this is good. But then when I was at the Center for Advanced Study in the Behavioral Sciences at Stanford, I saw the future, or at least a future. It was the period of genomics in about the year 2000. And I watched as the genomics people of the world moved all the data online and had a 24/7 chat essentially going. And they would say, somebody in New Zealand would say, we've got this part of this. And then somebody in Arizona would say, no, we've got this part of this. Here, let's share. They put it in the data and then they talk to each other. And then their graduate students come into the video conference and start talking to each other. I said, that's what we need for the study of communication. We need lots of data all in one place, computationally available, accessible. We need all kinds of people around the world, all these experts, to be able to connect with each other. And more importantly, we need to be able to bring the graduate students and the undergraduates, the emeriti professors into this kind of cyberspace. And then research will roar forward and we will have a generational sort of thing. So I created the International Distributed Little Red Hen Lab. We didn't have a name for it at the time, but you can find it on the web. You can also find our educational site. It's easy to find, just look for Mark Turner. Now the point is this, now a tremendous amount of my life since 2020, so 21 years, has been conducted inside this free-floating university, as it were, except that it has almost none of the features of a university. That is, people don't have appointments in it. There isn't a hierarchy. It runs largely on trust. It's worldwide. We've had undergraduate students who met each other in Red Hen and ended up getting married, despite the fact that they were 6 time zones apart when they first met. Now, it is true that this has some visibility inside my university. So when I publish an article with lots of our authors from Red Hen, they see that on my faculty activity report. But the story is twofold. One, perhaps 50% of my professional life occurs inside Red Hen, and it's where most of the research and teaching happen. I sit on dissertation committees around the world, but my university, except glancingly, doesn't really know that Red Hen Lab exists. I mean, they like it, they're very happy with the outcomes and so on. So my story here for the future of the university is in a way about the eclipsing of the university, the kinds of certifications we get, the sort of status we get from our roles, the kinds of social relationships we have for the purpose of research and teaching and so on, have for me and for others moved into a kind of future that the universities don't, it's on the periphery of the university. It doesn't organize the university yet. And I'm interested, as we talk today, about how do we blend these two stories, the story of the world in which much of our life, research, teaching, social capital occurs, and the traditional university structure. I see a lot of difficulties. So we'll get to that when we have present challenges. A lot of difficulties in trying to combine this into a whole experience for students and professors. But the story is that I now have these two lives, and they officially almost don't interact. That's my story.
So Mark's past is his future. So time is already getting confused. Mariano, let me just say one thing before Mariano has the opportunity to offer a story. We want to hear from the rest of you as much as possible. And I think before Kairos comes on the stage after Mariano tells us his story, let's just have a few other people in Interhub particularly. We have 2 graduate students on our Zoom screen, a couple of retired, so-called retired professors. So let's just create a little space for the rest of you, represented by some of the other people who are not on the panel officially, to join in. And then Kairos will connect our past to our present. Mariano, do you have something to offer?
I have a story. Is that what you're asking for?
So that's a very interesting question. Yes, that was the challenge. And, you know, stories come in different forms. So let's hear your version of what you think the story is.
First of all, I have to say that it is intriguing to see our friends from Kairos being quiet and seated. The message to me is that we are not doing the right thing. They are too quiet and too observant. So I'm eager to, whenever is the time, to listen to them. I'm going to share with you something that I was taught on my first year in college, actually first day. It was a class on history of political thought. And the professor said, this is day number 1. You are now in a university. So I have to read for you the first concept of a university that we have been able to identify in Spanish. This comes from Spanish king Alphonse X, and the year was 1256. And I want to read that for you because today it seems that one thing we want to try to do is think about the future. So this is the longest journey into the past that I can share with you as a Spanish-speaking person. By the way, the first university in my country was set up in 1218, and it's still functioning. So here I go. This king, this is the way he described what a university should be. And now I'm going to read it. The name for the university at the time was Studium, from Latin. A studium is the coming together of teachers and scholars, which is made in some place with the will and understanding of learning knowledge. And there are 2 ways of it. The first is that which they call general studium, in which there are teachers of the arts, as well as of grammar and logic and rhetoric and arithmetic and geometry and music and astronomy, and others like masters of laws. The second way is that which they call a particular studium, which means as much as when some teacher teaches a few scholars in a remote village. End of the quote. I am taking this concept with me since that day. And I think that this king, by the way, he was known as the wise king in the history of Spain. This is the so-called wise king. This king, I think that he was very good at sending this message. It is as simple as that. My question is for this session, the kind of complexity that we sometimes have brought into the universities, do we really need it? Is that what we want? And I leave it here.
So the Kairos Allied group is warming up by, so let's put Kairos on stage now, and then the rest of you, before we begin present challenges, I'm thinking of David and Patrick and Estelle and Jerry. You can accept the invitation to just join us and say a few words after Kairos. Kairos begins the journey from the past to the present, which, are you ready, Kairos?
We are.
Right.
Well, I want to say hello again. I am Maria Genné, and I'm the founder director of Kairos Alive, which is a social impact organization powered by the arts. And I'm here with my colleague, Parker Genné, and my son-in-law, Tom Johnson.
Hello.
And hopefully later today, our colleague will join us, Linnea Dublet, as well. And Chris Anderson is on the camera there, so there he is. And also acknowledging that we are dancing here on land that was taken from the Dakota people here in Minnesota, the center of the center of the U.S. Some people say, very close to the Mississippi River. So we are very honored to be here. And I just want to say a minute to add to the stories in that as a young person, I was frustrated in the schools because I wanted to learn with my whole body, and like some of you, I grew up at a time where we were told to sit still and learn. And what I found and what I gravitated toward was dance and music, because it was a way that I could move and be connected to the rhythms of all different kinds of music, but also to the earth. And so I'm going to invite you, if you are sitting, to stay sitting if you want, or if you would like to stand up. I'm just going to offer a few suggestions about moving or dancing or just listening. And then Tom is going to play some music that I think in my life as a dancer, but also as an educator and a performer and of people, because we had an intergenerational dance company of all ages, that's a song that we all can respond to. But let's first things first. So one way that think about moving is that it's something we do all the time, right? Just as we start talking about all these ideas, I want to say sometimes it seems chaotic and messy and imperfect, but that imperfection often gives us a time to try something new, and it unlocks our creativity.
It's that improvisation in the moment, every moment. And that imperfection is actually the beautiful perfection of each individually in this community here.
All ages.
All abilities and all backgrounds. As we work interculturally here in the great state of Minnesota and in the Midwest, in Wisconsin as well, across the United States, and now virtually here across the world, that universal language of movement and music.
So sound and rhythm. And I want to remind us all that this is a perfection-free zone. I was trying to remember.
A perfection. This is from my colleague Linnea Dublet. A perfection-free zone. That's right.
So wherever you are, I invite you to move and just take a few moments before we go back to this, as we will continue to converse in other ways. But let's just start by moving. So one way I think about it is just to find the beat and hold off on the music for a second, Tom. And then because of Zoom and the technical possibilities, when the music starts, I'm going to stop talking so you can hear. Okay, so just maybe a side to side in your chair. Just find that rhythm. That's a dance. You could stretch a little bit, so your side to side could slow down, but still keeping that rhythm. Or can you keep slow? Or you might step it and add another counterpoint to this conversation. Right? Or if you, like me, I'm gonna get up off the floor. So this is the music of Duke Ellington, Billy Strayhorn, amazing artists who helped to bring jazz into our life.
Oh, no, we're doing A train. We're doing A train. I was hoping we were doing I Got Rhythm. Sorry about that. Remember, this is a perfection zone. She was talking about Mariano, Matt, there you go, Jerry. Come on, Jerry.
There we go. Yeah, and I invite you all to take a deep breath in. And exhale, and as you exhale, feel a little bit longer, but remembering that our feet are on the earth, on Gaia, and we are all connected. Pass it back to you, Peter.
Wow, I hung a few lights behind me just to celebrate this festive mood. That was quick, wasn't it? Okay, so so we're moving here into the present, but and you called out a few people, as I did too. So let's just leave a little space here for the rest of the world, the rest of the inner hub that you can see on your screen. Anybody inspired to just say something about what they've done or where they are. And Jerry, I know you're always inspired because you always inspire me. So go for it, sir.
So my name's Jerry Gale. I'm a retired professor from the University of Georgia, the Department of Human Development and Family Science. But I want to take you back to the 1900s. Not that I was alive then, I'm not that old. But I did my PhD at a College of Home Economics, which often is not included in these type of discussions. And it was called Home Economics. Now they have different names. My college is now Family and Consumer Science. And the root of home economics back in the early 1900s was ecology. And it was about social change, and it was about women empowerment. And the early leaders of home economics in the early 1900s were people like Elizabeth Swallow Richards, who was the first MIT graduate in chemistry. And their work was to promote quality of life, ecology, nutrition, home environment, bringing science into the home. And they were about social provocation and change. And this was very influential for me as a graduate student back in the 1980s. And I was exposed to Gregory Bateson then and the Macy conferences and learning about systems theory and the connection, as Kairos was talking about, how we are connected in this broader ecology and how we need to work together in social change for women, for people of color, for indigenous people. And I was inspired back then in the College of Home Economics. So that's this brief story I want to share.
Jerry, thank you. I think it's so remarkable that ecology and economics, home economics, it's all about home and making sure everybody has a home. We do try to encourage younger voices. Estelle, aren't you glad to be referred to as a younger voice? If you have one, would you like to say a word of introduction? I really celebrate the graduate students, the future of universities.
Look, I'm gonna claim that, Peter. I am a younger voice, and it's all about, since we're talking about embodiment, what we choose to embody in the different passages of time that we share together. I think my reflections are on this idea of inclusion, and that really inclusion is about expanding the boundaries of belonging. You know, how do we create belonging in our communities and the places that we choose to organize and in our organizations? And I've been toying with this idea throughout this particular presentation, but also in the previous presentation on Wednesday about the InterHub that we were in together, about just toying with this idea regarding whether or not embodiment or embodied practice actually helps us get closer to our sense of connection to others. Do we tap into our greater humanity when we are centered in embodied activity? And I think that may be something worth exploring, you know, so as we're watching each other dance and feel and express and show expression, does that remind us of parts of ourselves as well? Does it create that sense of connection that we are talking about when we're talking about building inclusive communities?
We're really getting into the present challenges there, aren't we? That's great. Patrick, another graduate student from Sweden, is about to pick up his traditional Swedish stringed instrument and serenade us, or do something else. And by the way, after that, David, do you have some reflections from YouTube that you could bring into the conversation space? Thank you. Patrick.
I think Peter, it was more likely that I would bring in puppets than my instrument is untuned and hasn't been tuned for years, but that's another topic of this day. But anyway, I'm Patrik Sandar, and I'm a PhD student in Sweden in pedagogy, and I'm studying intergenerational learning from a more theoretical standpoint. But part of this is also doing it or practicing it in some way. And I have also a small story of something I'm kind of missing at the universities nowadays, here in Sweden at least. When I started my studies many years ago, I studied ethnography in Lund University. And one thing that was so incredibly brilliant there was the feeling of lack of structure, in the sense that there was not so much hierarchy. Of course, there were professors, there were PhD students, and there were young students just getting into the studies. But we had this monthly event called Ethnography Night, where everyone met up. They had a tea, drank some coffee, and discussed the latest research. And it was attended by everyone from professors to the newest of students. And I wish I saw that on more space, because that became relational for real. And that really helped in the learning situation, I would say. And I'm missing that right now. I can't see that in almost any other fields now. It's so much focus on creation of narrow goals and trying to rush forward towards something instead of the more open discussion and that kind of climate. And that's something I'm missing, and something I think I get out of this group, for an example, is this openness and possibility of opening up and discussing things in a very broad way. That's my short story of today. Mostly I'm behind the scenes doing the Zoom today. Back to you, Peter.
Well, you know, it keeps coming back to me, and I'm trying to think about trying to resist that, because I actually orchestrated it so David would go next. But Patrick, thanks for that. Patrick is a ventriloquist. He didn't bring his puppet, but he does sometimes put words in my mouth, and I am all the wiser for it. Anyway, my job is to crack jokes. So David, there's lots of people. We can see the chat's pretty active, and Rick Lathrop just joined us here in Zoom. What's going on in Zoom? In YouTube, David?
Sorry, Peter. We don't have a lot of comments in Zoom at this point, but we welcome comments. Anybody who would like to present their ideas. I have a few thoughts from my side too. Peter, if you would like, up to you.
Please you don't need an invitation from me. Okay, so David, go. Yes, you're such a fantastic ethnographer, for example.
Well, I'm not so sure about that, but I'll introduce myself just a bit and talk about the work that I do in the university. I have been working in universities now for, oh my goodness, we're looking at nearly 35 years, and I've been in education 46 years teaching. It's just an honor and a privilege to be able to be with many students around the world. And David Blake Willis is my name, and I'm an anthropologist of education, or an educational ethnographer. I'll put my description here in the chat in the YouTube. My own experience has been living in Asia for well over half of my life. So Japan, 33, I'm a permanent resident of Japan, 33 years that side. Have just come back from Japan, about half a year in Japan. And India, I spend a lot of time in India as well. I was inspired by Clifford Geertz when I was a student at Antioch College. He told me to go to the University of Chicago, the life of the mind, where I studied anthropology in South Asia. And I was very interested in the topic of cultural transmission, which our study group here, and of course, CIRET is very much about this idea of cultural transmission. And currently, I'm especially interested in the topic of shifting the culture, to go to anti-racism, to social justice, and going to especially decolonization of education. This is a topic that interests me the most right now. Just a bit about my work. As I mentioned, I'm an educational ethnographer, educational anthropologist of education. This is a book which gives you some idea of my work, reimagining Japanese education. So today we are reimagining the university. And I'd like to share just a couple of thoughts and then I'll end. From the university where I work now, called Fielding Graduate University. It has been around for 46 years, 47 years. And Fielding Graduate University emphasizes not only the work of the head, but the work of the hands and the work of the heart as well. Just a couple of books here about Fielding, and we are very much emphasize the idea of a scholar practitioner, and that's I think something that we all need to be moving towards, not only the work of the head, but the work of the hands and the work of the heart, bringing all of us to the table. So just a few short thoughts from my side.
So let's move back to the structure for just a minute, which is the program we promised the audience out there. And let me encourage the audience to make comments in YouTube and Zoom. I will respect on one comment I'm seeing, David, as you were speaking, this notion that Mariano introduced, that the locus of cultural change, the locus of the intellect and the mind and the heart, which we tend to think about being associated with universities, has frequently during the history of universities been not in the universities. So this idea that somehow, it's been, I think, a theme even in Marx too, you know, and certainly in mine, how can the universities engage with society more effectively, but also with the community, where some of the ideas that universities need to consider are bred. So let's now transition from, we're in the present, we've moved into the present, and we'll hear from Kairos Kairos again after this session, which is to discuss present challenges. There's a lot of foreshadowing going on in this conversation. We're all anxious to get to the future. So, but let's reflect on why are we unsettled about the current state of universities? So let me turn it back to the panelists and see, and there are a lot of them. So which ones come to the top of your list? The big issues, the big challenges for universities.
Peter, in the chat, Patrick and I have had a conversation just about the idea of sort of shifts in our thinking from universities about wisdom and relations to sort of what Patrick described as short-term gain. And I see that in my university as well. The University of Central Florida I mentioned, where I am now, has a 30-to-1 student to teacher ratio and enrolls over 70,000 students annually. It's a massive endeavor, and that university success has been driven by a push to online education. And I see that as one of the fundamental challenges. Kairos's presentation and discussion, a lot of the, as well as a lot of the things that my colleagues have pointed out on the panel, point to the importance of embodiment in our learning processes. And I think there are some challenges that we're still working through in what digital online education, distance learning education means for embodiment, both in terms of the relational things that Patrick and I were talking about, but also I think more generally. So the push to online I see as one of the biggest challenges. We're pushed away from embodied learning to algorithmic based distance digital learning. And I think we're just now starting to think about the implications of that. I think about Sophia Noble's book, Algorithms of Oppression, that came out a few years ago, the online academic discussions about predictive analytics and their use in the classroom. I think about other scholars like Wendy Chun, who wrote a book on control and freedom, developing a concept she describes as control/freedom, to sort of start us thinking about what the implications are of this disembodied, digital, distance-based learning. And I think there's some really significant issues to talk through there.
That way, I'll put in a plug for Jonathan's book on digital ethics. I invited Jonathan because he's really on the forefront of thinking about the issues you just described, and also because of the work that he's done and I've done in the environmental space. And those things interface because everybody's now worried about Bitcoin and how the computational needs of Bitcoin are making a significant contribution to climate change because computers get hot. So just to make a bridging comment.
Add to the conversation there, Peter, did you hear, I'm sure we heard the news yesterday that Tesla has announced they're dumping Bitcoin as a payment method,
yep,
specifically for environmental reasons, which I think is a really fascinating turn of events just in the last couple of days.
So that's a thread or a couple of threads. Others on the panel.
I can add something. I have a very specific question for everyone listening. And you can write to me, all of you on YouTube, anybody who sees this later. This is the sincerest form of questing. You can find me on the web at Mark Turner. That is, in many ways, we are finding methods of transforming the university. By which I mean universities were partly put together so you could have people working together in one place. But the problem with that is they were not connected. The universities, you had your teacher of the Roman Republic in one place and another teacher of the Roman Republic in another place and another. How do you connect these up? Well, in the Renaissance, they had official vagabond scholars, itinerant scholars who would go from university to university and try to make these connections. But in our age, we still have universities essentially as silos. How do we break this down? At the level of research, it's not so hard. That is, we are making inroads. We have, as we see here in this talk, we are able to put together the older researchers. It's not so easy for students, right? But because of various kinds of technologies, we're starting to be able to connect students to students, having them work on worldwide projects. A lot of this is outside of the university, like Google Summer of Code, which I've been running. Red Hen has been running Google Summer of Code for 7 years. We have hooked up hundreds of students. I've never met any of them. I've mentored them. We've hooked up hundreds of mentors, right? This is outside the university, but it's really good for people. Now, where is the spot that I just can't crack? That's on certification. Certification is a crucial cognitive scientific need because people have to make decisions. And mostly they make decisions by delegating because they can't go through all of the information, all the analysis, all of the other things, right? They pick somebody else who will give them information or a recommendation or let this other person decide, right? We delegate. We're talking about the eloquence of seemingly inconsequential detail. We start to read something by somebody and the way they use the language in the first sentence that helps us decide whether to keep reading or not. Little huge decisions made on the basis of little tiny things, and we have no way around it. We can try to be careful and criticize our own decision making, but attention is a very scarce resource, right? But we have to make decisions. Well, one way to solve that is to delegate, and a central component of delegation is certification. So for instance, I'm probably here now because in 1983, some completely different person whose name was Mark Turner got a piece of paper from the University of California, Berkeley that said PhD, right? Now, I was a Unix systems analyst for Lawrence Berkeley Laboratory. It had nothing to do with pieces of paper. It was because of what I could do, but really, how did I get in there? It's because I was in the math program and my math professor answered in a committee when they were looking at doing a project at Lawrence Berkeley Laboratory, that yes, he knew a student who could do this kind of coding and sent me up. Now, these are certifications, right? One of the central things the university does is certify. It's you passed this course, you got this grade, you got this degree. And I don't see a way, really, I keep cracking on this, but I don't see a way, a really effective way to get around it. The students want it, the universities want it. It's very hard for them to release certification because it's tied to money, tuition. And I have been a financial and university administrator at independent research institutes and in universities. Somebody's got to pay. Somebody has got to support education. And on the financial side, the universities can't release that product, that certificate. We can't really give you course credit from some other place. We can't let you have smorgasbord a la carte certification. So of the many, I believe the university in many ways is disappearing or transforming into something very different from this siloed little place with, you know, not really connected to the rest of the world. That's going away, but not the certification issue. And if some of you distributed around the world have thoughts about how actually to solve the, how to break up the certification industry of the universities without threatening them financially, because in that case, it won't break up. I'd be delighted to hear it. This is my central present challenge for the universities. The others, I have some techniques for. That one is a wall. Thank you.
So I'm going to give you a red pen badge of honor for that one, Mark. I'm mixing a whole bunch of concepts in there. Great, yeah, so important. So let's continue to just offer through the panel, and then we'll open it up a bit more. So Matt, Mariano, I mean, anybody that has a burning thing to say, like Parker, I don't know if she's waving to her father. No, her father's sitting next to her. I mean, if you really have to say something, oh, good grief, Rick. Just a second, we'll get to Rick later. Matt, Mariano, let me stay with the structure here for a minute. Anybody got anything to say about present challenges?
I could share something. I think Patrick was trying to say something, get our attention.
I just want to check the chat. So Sylvia has written some things that could be interesting to add into the discussion as well. That is part of the YouTube chat.
Okay, I could hold off.
But I could, I will.
If you've read it, I see it here. Actually, it is from the perspective of ethics. Do you want to read it, or is Sylvia in YouTube or Zoom?
Sylvia is in YouTube, yes.
Okay, so we can't speak with her, so maybe you could represent her, and then we'll go back to Matt.
I think it's possible to just answer the question, or should we read out the question? We could do that. Then I need to go up and see. So she has written a few different things, but one thing is, I notice a resistance to change and innovations. What strategy do you use for teachers to accommodate these changes? Is there a structured project for these teachers? As well as she also wrote, have you been thinking about new strategies for online education? What changes where students are studying online? A bit more.
So maybe we'll come back to those things. I wanted to address the ethics side because Estelle and I are teaching social ethics, and we changed the name of the course from Social Ethics, Contemporary Challenges to Social Ethics for the Future. I do think that this idea that the values underlying ethics, people have referred to as heart, absolutely key. But Matt, thanks for passing it to Patrick, who passed it to Sylvia. Do you want to come back with it or send it on to Mariano? I'm sorry, this is like talking boxes here. We're doing a tesseract, I think.
Well, I was just going to say a few words about the challenges of doing innovative generational work in universities. In the context of how hyperdisciplinary the boundaries are, we're talking, I mean, in so many ways, an intergenerational way of life, way of learning, way of being, way of caring, you know, in terms of demographic arguments, ethical arguments, social connections, psychological health, physical health. There are so many ways in which people realize it's so important, but yet we look at how disciplines are organized. In many ways, they're age segmented. You have people who are experts in children, experts in older adult life and wellness. And yes, you know, people will say there's a lifespan, you know, we look at lifespan development and so on, but they really zero in on specific issues experienced by specific generations. And I think that often leads to narrowly conceived models of intervention. If we're thinking about helping people thrive, intergenerational studies strategies to do that. So yeah, so I think that's a little bit of a trap. So even when we talk about like lifelong learning, you know, people can, that's, I haven't heard people arguing against that. And people even embrace having courses on universities for older adults. But in many ways, it often ends up being together but separate. So older adults, I mean, there are many programs where people, older adult classes, they have those, and then there are classes with traditionally aged students. So in many universities, there are true intergenerational ways of looking at things, but it's tricky. It's tricky to integrate both a fully age diverse group into courses. And even I think the concept of lifelong learning, the wisdom of that phrase, in a way it's so attractive, but I think we should challenge it a little bit. So for instance, there's this Yiddish proverb. It says, old age to the unlearned is winter, to the learned it is harvest time. So I would have a hard time meeting anybody who would disagree with that. And it's beautiful, and I love that for many years. However, if we ask the question, how would that fruit from the harvest time, how does that fruit taste during harvest time if it's eaten alone? So, I mean, in terms, not just leaving a legacy, but being of the world, the connectedness between generations, it's not enough, I would think, for us to just hold up learning on our own. It's being generous, it's learning together, and honoring everyone's life experience across the age continuum. So there's really some very fluid, aspirational ways to think about organizing different domains of university living and learning, which are more, I think, more aspirational, getting closer to the way we want to live and basically build university community connections. And I think when we talk about the future, I have some specifics I'll share about how to do some university intergenerational activity hubs, ways in which we could bridge some of these boundaries.
So, Matt, thank you for connecting intergenerational and transdisciplinary, because I think some of us have been alluding to the fact that our current rigid structures around disciplines is part of our present challenge. But I want to turn it over to Rick for a minute, because Rick Lathrop is a member of InterHub. He, along with some of the rest of us, are presenting in Generations United. And I would, for those of you who are not familiar with that organization, I would urge you to look it up, Generations United. It's a place for conversations between the generations. And Rick's project, he'll be presenting, that I'm honored to be part of, it, called Co-Generations. I don't quite know what Rick is going to say, but if I keep talking long enough, he's going to have to ask what my question. But Rick, you've been really working on this issue of how do we create these conversations between generations. What do you have to offer?
Thank you, Peter. Well, thank you everybody for what everyone has shared thus far. I was really touched by Mariano's comments about the wise king and the definition of a university. And little thing he added at the end, that part of learning of a university was, I think you said, going into a poor village. And I can't remember if he was teaching color or what exactly you said, but the poor village really got me. And then when Mark was talking about certification, and then when David was talking about the scholar practitioner model of fielding, which has been my experience recently, and a wonderful experience. And then also Matt talking about connecting the university to the community and the challenges of the university. I would like to put a plug in for the whole concept of experiential learning and service learning, which is fortunately, Mark, gaining more traction as a certifiable type of learning experience. And I was thinking of, I have many stories I could tell about it, as Peter and others know, but I want to tell a story of a friend of mine who's also named Rick, who is a wonderful scholar. He has a great Ivy League background, and he tells a story about how he finished his first 4 years, and he went to work as a teacher in Harlem, which, as you probably, maybe some of our international people don't know, it's basically one of the biggest slum areas with disadvantaged people in New York City. And he said, I realized I didn't learn anything of any value in my first 4 years of college. And he had an experience there that led him on to do more academic work. He's now a great academic scholar. Some of you know him. I'm not going to mention his name because I don't want to be known that he said he didn't learn anything in college. But my own experience is that I had a teacher once that told me, you know a lot about a lot of things, but you only know that which you really experience yourself. And that has always stuck with me, and the value of really experiencing things. So I could talk for hours, of course, about Global Service Corps and the service learning programs we developed over the years that actually, Mark, we were able to get accredited. We got to a point where we had a semester program to get 15 credits through various universities for a semester abroad. So I'm a big, we could all tell stories about this, but I just want to put a plug in for the whole idea for universities to move more to acknowledging the value of experience, and also from the co-generation standpoint, the value of mentoring with older and younger people, cross-mentoring too, not this kind of mentoring, which the academic community is so involved with. The professor up here, the student down here, but you know what? We have things to learn from the young people. So co-mentoring is, and in my own experience, I think one of the things that had the greatest value in my life was when people acknowledged me and my views, even as a young person. That opened up worlds for me to really be honored and to recognize that, hey, I have worth and there are ideas I have, and let's share them and learn together. So those are some thoughts I have. So Mark, thanks for that. And all of you for all the thoughts. Thank you.
So that person was Rick Moody, and he went to Yale. And I went to Brown and Harvard, so I'm happy to call out Yale as a place where you don't learn anything. That's something obviously not true. Sorry, who was going to go next? That was the joke. Ivy League joke for those of you that with those jokes. Where are we now? I'm also thinking about Mariano's comment about Kairos sitting still. I think it's unhealthy for them. Tom, I know you had some ideas about the challenges of universities. Are you willing to share? You need your guitar?
No, I don't need my guitar. Hello, I'm Thomas Johnson. I am working here with Kairos right now. I'm a teacher of music and improvisation. I got my bachelor's in commercial and jazz guitar, and my undergraduate and my master's in pedagogy. One thing I'd like to acknowledge first and foremost is the present and the future. Me being a white male in the dominant culture, am I the person to be answering these questions? And do I need to reflect? Do I have anything to say before I start talking?
I think your mic is out. We can't hear you.
Yeah, you're muted.
Lawrence Pappy Stokes.
You're muted again.
My grandfather told me, Tom, sometimes when you don't know what to play, just sit on your hands and listen to what people are doing around you. And that made me open my eyes to realize that we can truly know and find answers. We think that some of these answers are like what's going to happen in the university are impossible. But if we start letting other voices be heard by sitting on our hands and letting other people say, play, speak, emote, use their intercultural, transcultural, whatever word you want to call it, that's where we hopefully will start making changes. And arts and improvisation help. If anyone reads Dr. Charles Lim or watch Arts in the Mind, PBS special featuring Kairos Alive, he is the foremost study on improvisation and the brain. And the biggest thing, whether you be playing jazz improvisation or you're doing freestyle hip hop, is that the frontal lobe of your brain, which basically it tames down your shame. Because when you improvise in an artistic fashion, you have to just say, I'm gonna go for it. And what I might play is garbage, but I'm going to go for it. And that is what we need to do instead of just sitting around using these same academic terms that we've been using for the last 70 years. I also would like to, for all of you teachers out there who have been going through COVID like this and trying to figure out how do I teach, how do I connect with students, I feel you, I recognize you, I see you, I've been a part of it, and I am very honored to be here with that. And now I'm just going to sit on my hands and listen to ideas.
We have a question from Sylvia. What is your view of the intergenerational relationship with transdisciplinarity? Question to the whole group, of course.
I love that question, but I should give Mariano a shot to chat. I'm sure he has some thoughts too. I have an example even. Mariano, do you want to go?
You go first, please.
Okay, so I'm sort of new to transdisciplinarity, the whole framework of it, and I find that it really is freeing and opening up all sorts of possibilities. One program that I thought was just so wonderful, turns out it was way more wonderful after a group with a transdisciplinary lens took it over or explored. Meals on Wheels is a fantastic program. We generally have volunteers. It could be high school, college students, community residents of all ages, bringing meals to people who tend to be homebound. It could be older adults, but people who generally have ambulatory challenges. And in some programs, they kind of come in and share stories and talk, as well as provide nourishment and food, delivering the meals. So at Penn State, we had this really cool program. I thought it was super cool. We had a youth service learning program for Rick Lathrop. experiential learning. It was a service club. They transported many of the seniors, people involved, to a central location where the food is made, a community room, and we had interest groups and did music, drum circle. It was very rich, it was great. Then I heard a group from Madison, Wisconsin. It was the Area Agency on Aging. They had a Meals on Wheels program. But instead of just delivering the meals, they also delivered, packets of birdseed and an instructional photo sheet, fact sheet of different types of birds. So on one hand, wow, Meals on Wheels, we're thinking nutrition and maybe social interaction and so on, but here you are, you're delivering an open-ended way in which people could develop a new hobby. They could go outside, get turned on and excited by birds. They're in their lab outside, people are seeing what they're doing, they're talking, they're experiencing birds, they're sharing a hobby, they're getting more connected on their own terms. And it just really, this openness to different domains of engaging people across disciplines, across the study of birds. I forget what it's called, the science of it. But it was just so fluid, really thinking about human thriving and the lack of social connection in so many people's lives, as opposed to feeding them or talking about food or doing an activity that you conceived. So at any rate, I feel that's an example of how a transdisciplinary framework could help us bring in people across the university, different skills, and certainly be more engaged in community quality of life for those people who are particularly isolated, especially during a pandemic. All right, well, that's I hope that example gives a little sense of my own appreciation for being a part of this conference and being turned on to transdisciplinary ways of thinking and intervening in the world around me. I hope that helps address Sylvia's wonderful question. Now Mariano's going to have a better story. We like to.
I don't have a story. I have
we're like brothers.
A draft question. Answer. Thanks for the question. I intended to say something on Mark Turner's big question, but I'm not gonna do that. And I wanted to comment on Sylvia's reflection on resistance to change, but I won't do that. I'm gonna keep with the last question, which is nice. Thank you very much. Here I go with my answer. It's gonna be twofold. First, Matt Kaplan and I wrote a paper a few years ago, and we said, for both of us, talking about generations always means paying attention to both. A, the struggling between sameness and difference, and B, the passing of time. What is different in moving from interdisciplinarity into transdisciplinarity compared to moving from intergenerational into transdisciplinarity? I think that the former, from interdisciplinarity to transdisciplinarity, is a movement between disciplines, beyond disciplines. However, if we introduce the word intergenerational, the beyond, the trans, is about moving beyond through relationships, but through time as well. And here I want to raise something that I'm not an expert in transdisciplinarity, but I have checked probably a dozen of books, so to say, reference books on transdisciplinarity. I have not found the word intergenerational in any of them. So, but please don't take this as a representative sample at all. And I have missed fully a reflection of the time-bound dimension in human life. For me, when we talk about intergenerational whatever, we are making an effort to highlight that we live in time. And then we find ideas and words like time locations, time trajectories, period, cohort, generations, memories, kairos, life stages, lifespan, life courses. And where I live, where I work, at my school, where I am the dean, I have to say we are fully time illiterate. We as scholars, we still think that this is about young people coming to learn and some adults, maybe some older people teaching. Our language to play in time, within time, about time is so poor that we still are expecting those 18 years old as being the golden students coming in the first year in college. That's so poor, so tiny, it's so nonsense, because chronology is just a 1% of the time dimension in human life. So intergenerational to me is an invitation to include a strong emphasis, a multilingual emphasis around the question how we are moving and being and becoming in time, through time, in a multi-time way to understand. Let me finish. I don't want to be treated as an adult. I want to acknowledge the child in me, the youth and the youngster in me, the older people in me. It's not coming in the future. It is in me because I have spent 15 years of my life studying older adult education. I've been the chair of an older adult association. And you know what? When I introduced myself as an older person, there was always someone saying, sorry, you are not an older person. You are a youngster, you are an adult. You cannot be an older person. Again, with all due respect, that's so narrow. And intergenerational, what does is it's like a broadening the sense of time that, by the way, in my university, it's scarce is not an existent. Today, we have this meeting. We're running an intergenerational project with the students. Give me 30 seconds and I'll be done. The project is based on a Harvard initiative called the Concordium. College students making calls to isolated older adults. Okay, so we have this meeting, and the question came, by the way, when the term ends and during the summer, will the project continue? There you go. The sense of continuation of life, depending on how long is the academic term. And then we reach in Spain June. We don't start until September. So between June and September, please, life stops. The whole planet doesn't move because we are going on a break. So ridiculous.
Let me put this to the group But Mariano, you animated the Kairos Alive group. And as you invited them before, maybe this would be a good time to think about Kairos coming into our conversation about time. But I don't want to put Kairos on the spot if they're not quite ready. But also I want to try to step off the spotlight a bit.
Sure. And
Sounds
later,
like you're
I
ready.
would love to share a little bit about the work that we're doing on Zoom, just relating to other questions. We have taken our in-person dance, music, theater work with older adults, play with older adults and their families, where before we showed up at senior centers, at nursing homes, at the VA hospital, the Veterans Hospital, in the locked mental ward, dancing and singing, locked psychiatric ward, actually. But we were welcomed in because of our willingness to accept everyone who was there, no matter their age, their ability, whether they could stand or not stand, whether what their cultural background was. And I have found over the years, especially in this last 21 years, specifically working with many older adult learners, many of them with cognitive challenges, is that people, when given an opportunity to be creatively engaged with other people that are welcoming and accepting.
Especially looking at leadership and young and artists of all ages, all abilities, and all cultural backgrounds as partners. Because us as artists, we are scientists, we are anthropologists. I mean, I'm a musicologist. Whenever we walk into the room, for us, it's really speaking again to that individual, that equity, as we talk about what is equity, what is access first for each of us today, remembering Wednesday, right? And so for us, we come in, yes, as these entertainers and as a program, but what we help with many other leaders like ourselves in our community, whether we do that in person or over Zoom, is really help answer that community health, that community understanding. And, you know, I think so much that we talk about what's going on right inside academia. As when I studied classical music, you know, I think so much I didn't understand how the community actually outside of the doors of the music conservatory that I studied at. It was when I opened those doors and I saw the way that they saw me, because I wasn't being seen because of my disability in school. That then I was able to actually hold my power and speak my truth. And for me, that was working. The word transdisciplinary didn't exist when I went to school, but I did an incredible project with, anyways, I don't need to talk about this, but with the president of my college and the now film and music history professor at Lawrence University. So, and this work of Kairos.
Well, it's that whole idea, and we'll start moving here for a minute, and I want you to come over here, Parker.
Oh, yes.
So you can sing. Just to remind us that there are people that we forget about that are in the room or in our community or down the road, or if we start paying attention, even when we're bringing those as meals on wheels, we call it in the United States, but that way of bringing sustenance to an older person that might not be able to get out very easily. But maybe if we invite them to sing their favorite song or just hum a tune, or maybe I'll guess a song, and invite that communication, that connection, in other words, in other ways than just speaking. It's reaching our hand, and we're finding we can do that even across Zoom now. Staying connected even when we're on summer break, staying connected to the people that are around us. And we found at Kairos that the older adults that were before in the back corner, we get them in the center of the dance hall, and we dance with them, not for them or to them. So I think we have to be thinking of that with. So with that, we have a song about this world. So we invite you to take.
How should we embrace it in our bodies?
We've been talking a lot. I've been talking, thinking. I invite you to just take a moment, just wherever you are, to just expand however it feels good from the center of your body, reaching out. That's a distal move. Beautiful, Rick. And just take a deep breath in. Thank you, Mariano. And then it feels good. Maybe cross your midline, give yourself a hug. Take a deep breath in, beautiful, David, and then expand. All of you, I know that you're dancing there and moving out in that, the rest of the world, our YouTube attendees, thank you for doing this with us. And one more time, and this is Figaro the dog. And breath out, just, well, I don't know, inhale, outhale, wherever. Inhale, exhale. Okay, yes. So this is a song that I thought was made famous by Louis Armstrong. Is that correct?
Yeah, but it was actually not made famous when released. It was not until it was put in the movie Good Morning Vietnam. Louis Armstrong, maybe one of the greatest artists in America of American music, had only one hit, and that was Hello Dolly. One number one hit.
Well, this is a song that I love to hear. Many of the people that we work with, many that happen to be older adults, like enjoy this song. So I invite you either to stand, and you could move or just take a walk. In this song, he is, or the person, they are singing about what a wonderful world. Could you give out some of those lyrics, just speaking them before you sing them?
I see trees of green, red roses too. I watch them bloom for me and for you. And I think to myself, what a wonderful world. Or my favorite lyric of all, in some tradition they call it the Nagoon, or in the Scandinavian tradition that some of my ancestors come from, it's called a thrall, and it's that la la la. So I invite you, remember we're on Zoom or on YouTube, so no one can hear you except you. If you want to sing along, invite you to be in that present moment. I see trees of green, red roses too. I watch them bloom for me and for you. And I think to myself, what a wonderful world. Oh yeah. I see clouds. Sorry, I got a brain injury. What are the words? I see clouds of white, clouds of white, the bright blessed day, and the dark sacred night. And I think to myself, what a wonderful world. Oh yes, the colors of the rainbow, the colors wonderful world it is with you in it. Thank you so much.
And remind us all, as Mariano said so well, that we are all those. We still have the youth, the playful spirit within us, right? That energy drives how we are in the world, and welcoming that young person and that older person and the person in the middle is a way that we can all learn.
Well, when we remember older adults or folks with disability, which, I'm a person with disability myself, and I think it's, important to talk about that, is that when we bring, people who are ready ourselves, ready, however we are in our isolated world in academia, when we are reminded by the stories of our elders or the stories of why we got into what we do. I learned everything I know from this woman next to me.
Oh, okay. Thank you. But I want to remind everyone else that we learn from each other.
I was going to get to that.
Okay.
I'm just a little bit slower because I got this brain injury.
Okay.
And you always forget the past, and you're always forgetting the future. And so you just live in that present moment. So, but just, those elders and those folks with disabilities, they remind us that what matters most is what's in our hearts and our spirits. So I just want to send that back to you all. 1, 2, 3.
Okay, so we are at a break. There's no such thing as a break. It's embodied. Take 5 minutes, take 5 hours, whatever you want, but if we're having fun together, let's come back in about 5. Okay? See you in a 5. David, I see you're still here. What's going on in Zoom? I don't know what's in YouTube.
We have a bit. There's a time lag, so it's a little bit challenging, but it's going well, I think. Patrick just gave the comment, and I agree with him about that. So, we actually are getting some participation from folks. They're only 16 to 20 watching. I so prefer the Zoom format if you can do it. I thought they did a good job with the Presencing Institute, having 160 people together. Having small breakout rooms really makes a difference. So we'll look forward to this. But I think it's going wonderfully. My goodness, much credit to Kairos for your wonderful presentations.
Yeah, I think, as you know, we couldn't do breakout rooms here, but I think it's worked pretty well with the number of people we have in Zoom, because they're interacting more than just the panelists, which makes it, I think, more lively.
I think it's good. I'm good. Patrick, your thoughts? Kiddos, your thoughts?
I'm not sure if they're here.
Yeah, everyone's on break, I guess.
Yep. Peter, this is Estelle. Can you hear me?
Yes, I can.
Yes, so I have to head to a meeting with one of the professors, but I just wanted to say this has been really thought-provoking and just such a pleasure and a joy. So I appreciate the invite to participate.
You're welcome. I did respond to your chat. I think this notion of inclusiveness always come back to, and I appreciate you bringing that up earlier.
No, my pleasure. And I will see you soon.
Yes.
See you soon, Estelle.
All right. Bye, David. Thank you so much.
Take care.
Bye, Patrick. Bye, everyone.
Bye. I'm back as well, if that wasn't obvious.
Hi, Patrick. So while we have just a couple of people, we will be meeting on the 17th as the InterHub group. So we can reflect on this, but also talk about some of our upcoming things, which are just seem to be springing, even as we interacted on Thursday with 2 different groups. Warm data is an interesting concept too.
Oh, they're hearing us on YouTube. Hello, YouTube. They've been hearing us, Peter.
Yes, they are.
So Maria, Francisco, thank you for your comments. Sylvia, whoa, Sandra, thank you so much for your comments. Ingrid, thank you.
Yes, and let me be sure that that little working meeting we had, which was an invitation. I mean, I haven't put my email in the chat, but I'm sure you can find out how to get in touch with us. I'll put the link to my email and the InterHub link for those that want to follow up. So just do a little bit more business here. This idea of doing the prototype, David, you were there. How do you think that plays out in this space? To ask people to kind of be intentional about talking less in the abstract and saying,
Action points, yes, action points, Peter, absolutely, for the universities of the future. We need to have those action points for sure. I see Keros is on our screen for the YouTube, but we're probably coming back shortly. I wonder if there's any chance to hear some more music or dance. I'm sorry, Keros, I'm so sorry. I'm so selfish.
Well, we just talked about prototype and action. And I said to Maria in the beginning, maybe that's the way we want to go out again. We should have that at the end. What do you think, David and Maria? Maria, are you there? Well, they're prepared to do more. I've been trying to ask them as best as possible to reflect on what's going on. So what do you think, David, at the end?
Whenever it feels right. And Maria is giving us more questions and comments. We've got some good ones. I've been transferring them from the YouTube to the chat here. So, oh, I'm hearing some flute of some kind, recorder or something.
Oh, this studio we got last June, it's just a space, but it has an automatic dinger when you open the door to go to the bathroom.
Careful now, we're live. That comment is in 100 languages around the world.
Yeah. Actually, it takes you out to the hall, but.
So, Maria, we were just talking when you came back on stage, where we could get more embodied kairos. I would like to suggest we did do what we did on Wednesday, which is have you on the way out.
Okay.
To have it resonate with people in that way. We're going to talk about prototypes and action steps. So, maybe you need to dance some action steps for us.
Yeah. And I love being the dancer, but I spend a lot of my life trying to get other people dancing. But what I've been so excited about working with older adults is that it changes the dialogue or the relationship between younger people and older people when they can dance together.
Right. Well, whatever you want to do. We'll go back to the panelists for some thoughts about the future, I think, as planned. And then, but we'll create this space for action, and intention into action and prototypes. David, do you want to say a word about U Labs? Do you want to, rather than me talking about it, do you want to talk about what we did together yesterday?
Oh my goodness, there's so much, so many wonderful things that are happening in the world right now. And one of the places where these things are happening is the Presencing Institute of Otto Scharmer, Peter Senge, and others at MIT in the United States. But it's not just the United States. The Presencing Institute and the creation of new prototypes for world action, and of course universities, it applies very much, is something that we are seeing emerging as possibilities. We all need to be in this right now. We all need to collaborate and cooperate for the future of the planet. And we are now extending this to many possibilities. So this Presencing Institute is about that at MIT. The link for our particular group, Interhub, and there are many, many groups around the world, is in the chat and the YouTube here. Really recommend that folks go to this. This, of course, is related to Theory U, which Otto Scharmer introduced to the world some years back, and continues to evolve. So the emergence, it's an emergent strategy for the planet is what this is about.
So we never left, but we're back. So hi, everybody. This is the, I hate to use any time words now that I realize we don't understand time. This is the next phase. We're in a different space-time probability field. Let me use that word. Whoa. And this is supposed to be focusing on the future. And Matt was just describing a session we went to together on designing prototypes as a part of their model of global activation of intention and action. I'm going to say one more word, and then we'll go to the panel again and have everybody talk about what they think future opportunities are. But I'm going to mention two courses. So for me, action includes creating learning environments, creating learning experiences. So two intergenerational course projects we did, by the way, this is my turn, and then I'll turn it over to people, were Wising Up, designing a course for the future, which involved elementary school kids, elders, and college students. The idea of design is what I want to put into space. We've got, that's a huge human talent, and design is a word coming into the fore. And the other one that Mark Turner participated in was called Wisdom Sits in Places, which, so I put the word wising up and wisdom into the space, because I think that's something we've lost and we've got to reimagine and reinvent. And we do that by creating learning spaces together, just as we're trying to do today. So, starting with the panel, maybe anybody who wants to jump in, it's fine. But anyway, panel members, Jonathan, please, maybe you could lead off as the youngest member on the panel.
Yeah, thanks, Peter. I feel like as one of the youngest members on the panel, perhaps that it's harder for me to look to the future because I feel so indebted to the structure of institutions as they currently are. But as an ethicist, I think about the sort of values that I think the future has to uphold or prioritize. So let me maybe start there as a way of framing a discussion. So when I think about those values, I think about interdependency. I talked about that a little bit before, and it's circled around. That's not only through the elements of time, which the panelists have discussed already, but I think, so not only across disciplines, but across generations. But I think the recognition that we're all bound up in these networks of relationships that constitute who we are and why we are in the moment, I think is a really essential piece of the value puzzle moving forward. I think also about transparency. So I think given the complexity, especially of digital information and digital engagements like this one on Zoom and on YouTube simultaneously, transparency, both about data and analysis and algorithms and all those things, has to be part of that value priority puzzle. And then integrity, which I've argued, and I'm sure you all recognize too, as an incredibly slippery value. But I think the idea of integrity for me is the idea that the values have to come from us, not from our institutions. So I think those three ethical concepts shape how I think about the future of academic institutions. From a faculty perspective or a student perspective, I think I want my students to recognize the affordances of modes of learning that have come up and will continue to come up. I think the thing that I see happening at my university, maybe as a model of maybe US institutions, research intensive institutions anyway, is that the modes of possibilities for student engagement continue to diversify. And I think getting them to recognize the affordances of each of those modes and how they vary is another key component to moving forward. Now, how to do that, Peter, since this is supposed to be the practical, what are we going to do? I wish I had some model I could share, but I think that's a goal of mine at least. And perhaps I'll stop there, and I value everybody's thoughts.
I would like to add the word playfulness, and we need to bring playfulness back into the academy. And how do we, out of that comes exploration, curiosity, and wonderment is when we're playful, and engagement to be with others. And, with the dancing that Kairos was presenting for us, to play with them. And how do we encounter our own hesitancy to step forward and do that? I think is the metaphor and the model in which how do we do that in the academy with our silos, to bridge across the silos and be playful with our colleagues and our students. And I think that will help a lot.
If I may, just to build on Jerry's comment, I think one of the most valuable things about my career to date, for me anyway, has been the space I've been given to do interdisciplinary exploratory work. So it's that play, Jerry. It's that I'm not constrained by the traditions of philosophy, and I get to do these things with folks that I otherwise wouldn't get to engage. For me, that's been an incredibly valuable part of my early career.
Go, Rick.
Well, I'm not formally a panel member, so I don't want to push myself into this, but I'm really impressed with some of the comments that I'd just like to add to. And Kairos, thank you for bringing us in the moment, for playfulness, for wonderment. And Jerry, I so agree. How do we bring this into the academic world with everyone? And the whole idea of community and including everybody. And Jerry, you mentioned playing with our students. I'm going to bring up Rick Moody again, because I had a wonderful experience with him through the Cogeneration project of a a dialogue between Rick, who's 76-year-old, and Jaden Wynn, who's 18 years old. And we filmed it, and we're going to have that as part of our Generations United workshop that we're actually filming this afternoon with Peter as well. During that, and this gets to the point of what I believe Mariano was talking about being so bound by time. And Rick was sharing with, Rick 76 was sharing with Jaden 18 some of his experiences of going through 9/11 and other things. And Jaden very much appreciates the experience of the older people. But after Rick said all this, Rick said, "Oh, I don't know how we can make these available and meaningful for young people. I want to have this communication, but I'm pretty stuck here." And Jaden said something that just blew my socks off. From out of the mouths of babes, the wisdom of young people. Jaden said, "Well, we have this present moment." And I thought, wow, be here now. Right now, we have something that is magical that we are sharing with each other. And one of the reasons we were able to do that is because Rick was able to drop all of his PhD, academic, intellectual, writer of many books, and just be present with Jaden. And they had this wonderful conversation. And it just made me think about how we can be in that space together, in community, really communicating with each other, the root word of which is commune. And Jerry, to your point, I so much appreciate what you're bringing up. How do we get to that point? How do we be here now with our students, with our communities? Kairos helps us doing that because we all let go of our boundaries. We do crazy things, we dance, we sing. But what they're doing is they're bringing us into the present moment, and the time disappears when we get to the present moment. So I just am appreciating the experience we're having together, being in the present moment, one with another, and communing, because I think we've kind of all dropped our identities and we're just here now with each other. And Peter, thank you so much for bringing these people together and for the comments and for people that really are doing that right now. It's just a wonderful experience. Thank you.
I have something to say. That I believe through improvisation and teaching everyone that can improv. Everyone does improvisation. When we have a conversation, we improvise. But when we bring it to music or art, we feel like, I can't do that. And there's a long history of this. But we also have to know what that history is. We're talking about time again. That we didn't look at improvisation in academia because that was music of peasants and people, black people, jazz music. And I mean, and that's why for so long our music institutions has refused to teach improvisation, even though our greatest composers, Mozart, basically made most of his money at the end of his life by improvising on the piano because people 4 towns away were doing his operas without him knowing about it. No one was tweeting about it back then. And there are a lot of studies that show at a young age, Moorhead, Pillsbury, that we as children love to improvise. There was a study on nursery rhymes, and the children would do nursery rhymes and take them, and then they would start improvising them. And then somewhere we get beat out of us that our voice doesn't matter. And sometimes our voice sometimes we need to realize when our voice matters or not. And that's what improvisation teaches us. It teaches us to listen, and to listen, what can I bring to the table? What can I add to this? Maybe I don't have anything to add to this, but maybe I do. And but to have, again, to look at the work of Charles Limb and what he's studying through his fMRIs of improvisation on the brain, that you lose that sense that it excites the frontal lobe, which is associated with language, and makes you lose all of that, all of your, like, a lot your shame, because you have to live, you have to go for it, you have to see what's around you. I live in Minneapolis right now. I live 2 miles where George Floyd was murdered, and it's been a tough year, but I've been listening and waiting for when I can bring my voice in a positive, appropriate, and when needed way. Because again, I only represent myself, and when people look at me, they see a white man, because that's what I am. And we've had our say for pretty long. And on that, I'll pass.
Thank you, Tom.
Something you reminded me of is at my former university, we had something called faculty learning communities. So it was hosted by the university, but faculty would set it up. And I organized one on improvisation, which brought together faculty from the College of Medicine, Education, Sociology, the vet school, across campus. And we would come and work together and play together. And it's a way of working under the margins of the university structure, and yet bring in this cross and transdisciplinary work, as well as intergenerational, because we had students as well as senior faculty involved in all this.
Also, speaking of ideas, transdisciplinary ideas, Edward Sareth has written a lot of great ideas on improvisation, and he's a big transdisciplinary guy. Patricia Sheehan Campbell, who teaches at the University of Washington, is a giant, and she has written so many great books on how to teach courses on improvisation. There's much more yet to be studied, and I'm quoting Charles Limb a lot. Often I feel music and arts have to be justified for being a part for even getting a seat at the table. Well, sing a song, and we'll let you do that. But as Charles Limb says, science is only beginning to catch up with art. And with that, I'll pass. Thank you.
Let me say something dedicated to our host, Professor Julieta Heider. I know she is a very fond person of the thought by Edgar Morin. And I know, I don't know whether Professor Heider has ever listened to this one sentence by Morin. It's not included in any of his books. It was an interview, very, very short, in a very, very invisible magazine. But to me, as brilliant as he is, I'm going to quote Professor Morin. If someone asked me the question, how old are you? I would answer, I have all the ages in me. That's the kind of complexity that an intergenerational lens may bring into university, as we want to call it, intergenerational university. So my suggestion for the future, which is to me is the present, every second is the future, is here. Two things. Number one, and I leave that to Matt Kaplan, he is the expert. Universities should do their best to become intergenerational contact zones. And Matt may elaborate on that. Second, I think that universities should, I'm going to use the word suggest, to teaching staff, like doing, what about 15 days stay in an early childhood school, in a primary school, in a secondary school, every X number of years. And we should welcome children, youth, adolescents, and young adults, those who we say don't belong to here, to come. The first time I was in Germany, I was told about children's universities. Something in my brain kind of broke. Children's university? Come on, are you serious? Children's university? And my colleague said, yes, Mariano, is an international movement. We welcome children at the university, and we work with them, and we do what we do every day, learning and teaching and researching and experimenting with children. And I said, but what about you? Do you ever go and spend your time at an early childhood school? We don't do that. So we miss something here, but it's good. It is ridiculous that in my neighborhood, just side by side, the back wall of my school, there is a secondary school. No one of us in my school has ever visited. And Professor Julieta Heider, you want to know the title of the interview? And this is my final contribution. The title of the interview to Mr. Morin is Continuum of Lives and Social Discontinuity. Universities are an example, as far as I know them, of social discontinuity. And I call those places cemeteries. Life is not within universities, it's outside. So let's open the doors for life to come in.
So I wanted to build on the comment about Edgar Morin and answer a question in the chat about kind of the origins of transdisciplinarity. Of course, there are many stories of origins, but the person who I mentioned in the chat room is a theoretical physicist by the name of Basarab Niculescu, a Romanian who worked in France as a physicist and who knew Edgar Morin. Actually, the word was first used by Jean Piaget. I mean, speaking of play and engaging with children and understanding their world. And CIRET, I also put the link, is the international center that Basarab founded and that he deserves a lot of credit for, in my opinion. And Florent Pasquier was Basarab's mentee, and you heard from him yesterday. He's a professor also in Paris, but an educator. So Basarab said that what characterized transdisciplinarity, to come back to the last comment and Maria's, actually Tom's comment, was an appreciation of complexity. This is a theoretical physicist talking. So we are talking about space and time and other things that are very complex, and levels of reality, and what he called the hidden third. This is the mystery in life. This is life. This is what is missing in purely even approaches, in my opinion. And just to end, Basarab has written many books, one of which is in English called The Hidden Third, but in French is called Theoretical Poems. So this notion that has been introduced into this space, that transdisciplinary asks us to dance into the spaces between things, including the spaces between art and science, and for that matter, the spaces between objectivity and subjectivity. Basarab, I'm going to finish with this. Basarab used the word cosmodernity to signal that we are actually entering into a different age of the emergence of civilization, an age that corresponds with the geological epoch, the Anthropocene. So these are big issues that transdisciplinary takes on, and it represents a challenge to those of us that exist in the cemeteries that perhaps universities represent. However, I'm looking at Jonathan's puzzled phrase. Yes, I have to celebrate also. All the universities I've been a part of, they're not, sometimes you can go to cemeteries and learn things. So maybe that's what we have to do.
Maybe I could chat a little bit about the intergenerational studies angle, as Mariano was hinting. I noticed there are a bunch of questions and comments in chat referring to questions like what is unique about an intergenerational perspective or about an intergenerational way of working with groups. So I wanted to say a few words about that. First of all, it's not about, or transgenerational, it's not about using that word and saying either you buy into it or you don't. Because we had a question as well from Sylvia Fishman saying what, no, I'm sorry, not from Sylvia. It was a question from Ingrid Valencia saying what if somebody doesn't connect with this point of view or buy into it? So in an inclusive way, I mean, we have to accept that there are all kinds of professionals and that with all kinds of circumstances and conditions, including some people being on a 10-year clock. They have to produce a certain kind of output. I mean, and that they're focused on a career, they have to do certain things. So in that sense, I don't think for them, the sentence is, let me show you about this field called intergenerational studies. If the person's studying water and I guess sustainable environments, I would say something like, oh, are you interested in new strategies to engage the public to be more active in ensuring that there's clean water? And then moving that intergenerationally, there are many public citizen projects that tend to look at, analyze water samples. We have senior environment core groups that analyze water samples. We have 4-H and other youth groups that analyze water samples, and sometimes even around the same water body on different sides of the water. But from a historic, to come together, the ethos of intergenerational engagement is really tied in the richness of people who are doing this activity coming together and realizing that what they're doing, what they're learning, what they're planning is more than your efforts plus my efforts, but it becomes, and it evolves into a new kind of thing, where they're realizing some deeper lessons about the human environment relationship, seeing a historical context of water and pollution and what we have to do, learn concepts of interdependence, civic engagement, that are not generation specific, but people behave in a generation specific kind of way when they have to focus on narrow questions of scholarship and so on. So at any rate, and then I'd also like to just share a couple of words where I think the tire hits the road in terms of thinking about the future intergenerational or transgenerational university of the future. So there really is so much done, so much great work done with an intergenerational framework already. Like Peter has talked about Generations United conference in June. There's going to be over 90 presentations, people doing these phenomenally creative and impactful intergenerational initiatives. And it's not only about generations. I mean, this really fits into a DEI framework, diversity, equity, and inclusion. It's just saying that let's not forget to include, to honor and include people across age, as well as across culture and geography and so on. So I like the idea of looking back to my Generations United point. I like the idea of looking at what is being done with the universities and breaking down a lot of the concepts we talked about today. I was going to say this week. It feels like we've been here and so many stimulating thoughts and experiences here. Thoughts about university community connections, scholar practitioners, how to break it down and so on. I do like the concept of a university filled with intergenerational activity hubs or intergenerational contact zones. So basically, we have people who work, learn, experience the university in many different ways, but generally they have a specific focus. So people who spend their time in classes and they have a multi-generational classroom, for instance. One hub could be focused on how do we turn multi-generational classrooms into intergenerational classrooms, where people are sharing their cohort, rooted experiences and perceptions. Actually, Mariano has several papers on this, and one we even wrote together. So that also turns into ways to train teachers. And it also goes to issues of policy. Like at Penn State, we have a Go 60 program where people who are over 60 can join some classes for free. It also turns into the environment. Are we going to bolt down the chairs so people sit there with their hands closed, or are we going to have opportunities for people to engage? So that's one kind of activity hub, one kind of focus. And then in departments, what do we do with people after they retire? I'm sorry to use that word, or let's say re-fire, however we want to use that phrase. So there are some places that have emeriti faculty. I mean, which is such a, like they have organizations, they have places that are integrated into the lifeblood of the university. So departments as well. For someone who wants to be engaged, has more under their hood, has much more to contribute, to actually be present and drinking coffee where students can drop in and talk about their research and they could make contributions. And then we have people studying humanities and the great books, the great philosophers of time. So who are the experts and who's studying this? We have high schools that have these all these humanities courses. They're doing books, they're studying books and sometimes even taking it into theater and improv and roles like that. And then we also have book clubs in the communities and they're separate. So, I mean, there's so much richness to have people explore the great works of history together and find ways to express it. And we have maybe an arts and architecture department, you have cultural arts, people who are engaged as richly as the Kiros folks. They could come together and talk about what would this mean? What are these thoughts about how we live and our civilization in the Anthropocene, if that's how you say it? How do we communicate that to other populations? How do we do, there are intergenerational theater groups around the world that could give us some thoughts on that. So at any rate, the idea of these hubs actually operationalizes these reasons to work together and these intents to provide these experiences with people. There's also literacy type of themes, just 30 more seconds, as Mariano says. That's a good line, I like that. Because you say 30 more seconds, nobody's gonna cut you off if you go 3 minutes, but I'll try to keep it close. All right, so in the fields of literacy, let's say, we have people teaching child literacy, adult literacy. There are also centers of family literacy, where people, when they learn a language together and practice the language together at home, people learn it, becomes it's an immersion experience. So why do we just take one generation out and teach them something as though they're going to embrace that in their everyday life? So the impetus, the argument of family and even community literacy. And how do we even want to learn other languages if we haven't tasted their food or seen their traditions and enjoyed the beauty of it all? So ways to organize community events and festivals with food, dance, other forms of expression. And the university has a connection. It could provide space, it could provide program, policy, place, and partnerships. The best intergenerational endeavors have partnerships. You can't do it alone. You can't have a youth club organize a phenomenal activity because they don't know how to recruit local older adults who are looking for young people. So at any rate, I hope I'm giving you a sense of the diversity and breadth of this kind of work and also the history. There's really a lot of work being done as well. And I really also hope that I'm not sounding like an intergenerational zealot, because I don't think intergenerational is everything. I think people need a choice. Some people want to move to Florida and live in a gated community and not be disturbed by hearing kids laughing or crying or splashing in the pool. And others feel that they've amassed, perhaps a retired dentist amassed a world of experience, and they see people having teeth problems and people who are unable to afford corrective dentistry and dental surgery. And they just feel they're thanking the skies, the Lord, for the opportunity to share their gifts. So we just want to provide a lot of opportunities for those who want to connect. And that's sort of an effective way to present it. Okay, so let me stop here. I just wanted to give a flavor of the field and the essence of it, some of the essence of it. And certainly you might be able to tell that I'm an intergenerational studies kind of person, but I got my degree in environmental psychology. So I looked at human-environment relations, human behavior, looking at community participation for my dissertation. And it seized upon me that young people and older adults in this community I was studying with a participatory action research model, and this really will be 30 seconds, those in the community that had the most to lose by this $1.5 billion redevelopment plan from the Port Authority of New York, New Jersey, and the Department of City Planning in New York, those who had the most to lose had the least say. They were not going to evening meetings. They did not know who the council people were and so on, how to be known, but they were the most vulnerable. They spent the most time in the community. So I followed with an open mind what was going on. And it turned out that when you bring people together in that context, in a community visioning perspective, they become more powerful. The young people have more of a voice because the older people who are buying into a joint effort, they vote. People would all of a sudden lean in and listen. Politicians would listen, and so on. So the intergenerational angle can be an activator for social change, if it is appropriate. Okay, now I truly will say thank you for listening.
I want to thank Matt for reinventing the temporal sense of 30 seconds, but very important stories. And I think you are not a zealot, but you're enthusiastic. By the way, other things are going on in the chat. Mark Turner's written a paper. I put in some links into the intergenerational schools developed in Cleveland. And David suggested that we should hear, before we hear from other people that we can see, that Julieta has a comment. Is that still the case, David?
Would love to hear from Julieta, and of course in Spanish will be fine, or whatever language, but would love to hear from you, Julieta.
¿Y por qué no podemos comprender?
So, Mark, do you want to translate, or should we have Mariano translate?
I think there are better options in this group. Let's rely on the group.
Julieta, please.
You're on mute, Julieta.
Mariano, please translate my reflection.
I'm gonna do it for
I'm gonna do it for free because it's you. Typically, I just get some money, but in this case, I'll do it for free.
My English is very bad. Okay, Mariano.
He said,
His sense of humor in English is very bad too, so you should go.
Estaba diciendo, Julieta, que como eres tú, voy a traducirte con honor y gratis. Normalmente cobro a las personas, pero a ti va a ser gratis.
Madre mía. Ok.
Adelante, puedes hablar.
Yo, a ver, tú vas a traducir, ok. Pero tenía que traducir en inglés para evitar...
Sí.
Ok, YouTube. Entonces, tú puedes traducir, Mariano.
Sí.
Por eso, si traduces para que se pueda traducir, se pueda en YouTube, si no, si habla español, el YouTube no traduce.
Ok. So she is gonna speak in Spanish, and I'll do my best to translate, and I apologize. Adelante, Julieta, cuando quieras.
Bueno, entonces hablo en español. Bueno,
sí, y yo voy a traducir.
Ok. Las sesiones tratan sobre varios problemas de la universidad, pero se amplían a los procesos educativos intergeneracionales, más que la universidad. Esa es una.
Okay, so first, initially the session was about problems and challenges in universities and for universities, but the way I see it, and I'm witnessing, is that you are talking about wider educational processes, intergenerational educational processes.
Ok, entonces sigo, ¿no? La segunda está ligada. Esto introduce varios problemas en los procesos cognitivos y emocionales que de algún modo son distintos en las distintas generaciones.
So when we focus on educational processes, again, intergenerational, there are some issues coming up. For instance, cognitive and emotional differences according to the generation you belong to. So those issues should be taken into account.
Y lo tercero, termino, más allá de la universidad del futuro, están los procesos educativos del futuro que ya son del presente. Eso es. Gracias. Thank you.
So the last point is that beyond the university of the future, the very topic should be education in the future. However, those educational processes in the future are already here. Thank you very much. And again, my apologies to the very respectful work of translation.
Thank you. I would like to just say that to me, it's the future of lifelong learning, whether it occurs in universities or wherever it occurs. And I'm reminded by Julieta from the comment from William Gibson, the science fiction writer, who said that the future is already here. It is just unevenly distributed, which I think gets us back to issues of equity and social justice. So Jonathan said he wants a module, he wants an idea for a concrete action. He's a digital and environmental ethicist. Does anybody have some practical suggestions about a prototype? I've already mentioned some of the courses that we've done, but and Matt, you mentioned water. I often think that water is a very good topic for systems thinking and thinking through time. But Rick Lathrop, you put your hand up. Do you have an idea for Jonathan or for anyone?
Yes, I thank you. I want to tell a story, and I think it partially may answer the question of a prototype. I'm not putting this out as the example, but it's an interesting experience I had. And it also talks, I think, to the problem that Julieta was talking about. So the story that I'm telling is actually a transdisciplinary, transcultural, transgenerational experience that I had at a time when I didn't even know those names. I didn't even know those words. I didn't even know what that meant. But now reflecting back on it, I realized that's what happened. So the story is that in this Global Service Corps program that my wife and I ran for 27 years, we were shut down by COVID a year ago. But the last trip we took, the service learning volunteer kind of participatory action research experience, was a 2-week, what we called friends and family trip to Cambodia. And it was interesting because the friends that came were almost all my age, in the 70s. And there was one person that came who was in her 30s, about 30 years old. And I thought, oh, what's going to happen? What kind of experience is she going to have? All these old folks. And so I talked to her ahead of time. I'd gotten to know her a little bit. And she said, oh, no problem. I enjoy older people. So, okay, I hope this goes well. So 5 of them, I think, this young woman who's now doing her master's degree in MIT in social justice, it's interesting, but she was with 4 women who were all in their 70s, all of them who had PhDs. And their service learning project was to go to a Buddhist monastery. It was what we call a Buddhist immersion experience, where they were going to learn meditation, they were going to teach English, and they were going to live in that community together. So here we had transgenerational, transdisciplinary, and there's a wonderful monk who spoke perfect English who taught them meditation. So it was also transdisciplinary. And I was really curious to hear what the 30-year-old experience was of this. And so I talked to her after, and I observed them because I'd go visit them. I was there in Cambodia with them and did some orientation with them. So I got to know them pretty well in a short period of time. This was only 2 weeks. At the end of the program, I sat down with a 30-year-old and I said, well, how did it go for you? And she said, I now have 4 more grandmothers. And that just spoke volumes to me. And what it said to me was, number one, she dropped the idea of being in a group with older people, high degree, high intelligent people. And she was just there with them, doing things, serving together, learning, being in another culture. So they were forced to get out of their own culture. And the older people, I love these older women, they all dropped their identity as PhDs, psychologists, faculty members, and they were just together. They just had that experience together. So I don't know if this is the model or the way that we're looking for, but to me, it goes back to this experience of community that they had, how they communed together. And I just, you may be tired of them, but I have my 2 Zen statements of the last 2 days that I want to share. And I think it really relates to what we're talking about. And the first one is from Rumi. And this is particularly for those of us who are academics or intellectuals, and I consider myself somewhat of a, I'm not a academic practitioner. I'm a practitioner learning about academics again. But here it is for us, from Rumi. Behead yourself. Dissolve your whole body into vision. Become seeing, seeing, seeing. And here's from Rinpoche, Sogyal Rinpoche. Although we have been made to believe that if we let go, we will end up with nothing, life reveals just the opposite. Letting go is the real path to freedom. I was going to say I'm going to do this all in 30 seconds and take that trick, but I didn't. But there's my 30 seconds. Thank you.
Thank you, Rick. I was just about to invite those that haven't spoken, who are kind of sitting on the edge of their seat to do so. Then a note came in the chat from David, and David, I want you and Patrick to know how much I've appreciated you monitoring this chat, saying that Marco, who has also been in the background, but essential to our time together, has a comment. And Mariano, perhaps, I don't know whether Marco wants to speak in English or Spanish. Marco, are you still there? I'm sure you are. You're watching us. Well, perhaps he is busy. David, you were the one that said he had a comment. Do you want to just see if he's around, or?
Peter, while we're waiting for Marco, I've got a challenge on present challenges. This really will be 30 seconds. If you want to replace something, you have to understand what the value it provides. It keeps it in place. Now, we would like to get rid of an awful lot of age segregation, not universally. And it should be easy. I'm a cognitive scientist. If you look at people in their environment of evolutionary adaptation, the way they learn is almost not at all by age segregation. That is, around the fire, at the dinner table, wherever, there's always this mix. And the minute we're outside the classroom, like in setting up research projects or other projects, we mix in people of all different ages, no problem. It's normal to us, it's natural. It's what we call ecologically valid. What's not ecologically valid is taking a bunch of 8th graders and making them spend 6 hours a day with each other on the assumption that there's somehow a cohort, with a teacher. And yet it persists throughout K through 12 education in the United States, throughout all the European schools I know of, the South American, Latin American schools persist. In the university, that first seminar for those entering students, matriculants, they're regarded as a cohort. So in the same sort of way that I have a hard time figuring out an actual practical migration path of possible steps so as to transform certification in the future university. So I'm having a hard time figuring out why it is that age segregation, highly ecologically invalid, persists so strongly. There must be great value that it delivers that people do not want to give up. Why is it that it is so valuable that it is the default, and it is largely, except on the periphery, everywhere in my experience? What is it that makes age segregation in education so hard to displace?
Mariano.
Mark, believe it or not, this very morning, a journalist phoned me with the same question, and it wasn't you, I can promise. Let me read what I answered, okay? Less than 30 seconds. My hypothesis is that ageism and age segregation will exist as long as we insist on using chronological age as a bargaining chip, sometimes the only one, in so many social processes. These days, we are talking about gender fluid people. Let's talk about age fluid people. If we eliminate the variable, no more age segregation. Let's don't use age as the currency. By the way, as we do with credentials. Credentials is a currency in a market. You eliminate the currency, the market explodes.
So could I just elaborate? We also need species fluid people. That is to say, I really think we have to embrace our natural connectivity across life forms. But the more general answer is that we haven't put in the space here is power. When you ask a question like Marx, who is it that has the power? Who does that benefit? And I actually have not, I want to use the word neoliberal. Economic and political power around the world is aligned to benefit a relatively small and growing number of wealthy people. So if you answer about certification, you immediately, I think, follow the money, and you ask whether it's age segregation or whether it's gender certification, who benefits the status quo? And my last comment is, unfortunately, universities have not historically been change agents. They, in fact, have done far too much to be part of the existing power structure and to resist really being truly innovative in a cultural sense. And that, to me, is the biggest challenge. How do we try to have universities lead rather than follow, and disseminate and distribute power across generations and across genders, rather than just perpetuate the categories that we exist today?
A great way to answer a lot of the questions is to think about folks like Kairos Alive, or other, you know, community arts led by artists, scientists, and who are working in all those different communities. You know, right now, Kairos, over the last 60 years of my mom's career here, both with Kairos and with Young Dance, and as an arts educator your whole life, both in academia and in schools, in faith communities, in hospitals, in the top orchestra, and one of the top orchestras of the country. And, you know, I think just, we say, oh, well, what's supposed to happen? I think that first step is just looking in the circle that you're in, seeing the ones who are the trusted allies, the ones who start with their heart. You know, I'm right now working in academia, and as I mentioned, in the same problems of inequities and inaccessibility, whatever all the words are still there. And when, you know, what do we do? When we talk about community, you know, I think so much of the work of my mom, since Young Dance and now Kairos Alive, which is quite a long time, these residencies, these structures of education that we've shown up in, that residency model, I think is a really great model for transdisciplinary work. And I want to say that transdisciplinary work is never just in the university, because the university is in a community. And so, you know, I think our work over the years, specifically working in rural and in, what are cities called? Urban centers, thank you. And on the digital world, Kairos has been working on Zoom for 4.5 years, because we already knew of the extremes inequities in the isolation, and thus then the lack of high quality arts engagement with older adults and folks with disabilities and all people. And so I think, you know, Kairos, it always feels like this upward battle, because we're always even convincing in a panel the worth and the need. And so coming back to my husband's comment, Tom, about, well, I'm interested in the narrative of these artists, you know, it's about those partnerships. And I think so much when we go into the community that the academia lives in, those partnerships already exist because we have to, because most of us are in a state already of emergency, and we depend upon our community for our learning. And so I want to put that out. I also want to talk about, at least here in Minnesota and in Minneapolis, the community colleges, the more kind of that we in academia, or for me, coming from a liberal arts education, which is definitely a thing of privilege, that we put that power on the trade schools. We put that power in the community activism. And it's about us changing our language, as we are all talking about today. But, you know, I've worked with Kairos here 10 years, and I've been an artist with my mom teaching since I was 3 years old. And I think over and over again, the same conversations are like, what do we do? You know, we have to hit this A, B, and C. What if there's no A, B, and C? There's no 1, 2, 3. You know, what if it's just all of us here and listening to each other? And I think we talk so much about these theories of embodiment or these ideas, and just know that people like Kairos, and I'm sure people you have already in the room here, and just by opening that door and looking wider through the window, looking at the ones who are marginalized, you know, looking at those who are not the dominant culture, ask them what matters to them. And so I just, that in these artists, as we are, these entertainers, these ones who invite us to connect first to our heart and our soul and our body and our mind at the same time, invite them in, bring them into the circle.
So as I said in the chat, I think we're going to be bringing this to another point in time, which I won't call a close. As I said several times, there are more activities in Interhub, and contact me or others. And our next session actually to plan the future and to prototype is on Monday. So any last minute 30-second or less comments before we let Parker take a breath. I love the enthusiasm. I love the inclusion. I love the energy. Any more comments before we turn it back to Kairos? Matt. Matt and then David. How about that? And then we'll go to Kairos.
Just a short one. I found it interesting that it was Mark Turner, a cognitive scientist, to bring up the issue of age segregation. Basically, there's so much done in cognitive science and communication sciences about stereotyping. You know, what we don't know, we fill in the blanks, and we see that, how people develop in-group and out-group perceptions and so on. And the best, as far as I have a background in psychology, the best interventions I've seen are to provide people opportunities to get together where they get to know one another and dispel in ways in which that dispel their previously held age-based stereotypes, whether it's dancing, eating food together, talking stories, a kid asking a senior, what do I do? I've been dating this girl for a month now. I don't know how to get her to kiss me. I mean, a question like that is timeless, you know, and getting a nice answer to that would dispel some stereotypes about older adults being out of tune, forgetful, and not somebody you should talk to, maybe, who's not with it. So it's how we frame these engagements, and that's one reason why this field is so valuable, because it helps people to reconnect in ways that are good for the lifespan and for our society and civilization.
So we have heard from Marco, and he has no particular comments at this point in time. So Marco, thank you for your support. David, I was turning to you, and David said, Peter would love to hear your closing comments, tying it all together. No. I've talked enough.
I do have a couple comments.
Yeah, good. You tie it up for us, David.
Well, I don't know about tying it up, Peter. Thank you so much for your commentary and your inspiration, your leadership in all of this. And of course, it's a co-leadership, isn't it? It's a co-sharing altogether here. I'd like to close with three things. I'd like to mention, first of all, the work of Michael Tomasello, The Becoming Human, a Theory of Ontogeny. I think this is really important for all of us to understand that for most of human history, most human beings have been about community, collaboration, cooperation. It is a small group of people who have claimed power and space and economy, money and everything. And now it's time for the rest of us to take back the dialogue for what is happening here. In my background too is the American River in Central California. We live right near the American River. This is where gold was discovered in 1849 in California. And it is a symbol not only of extraction and destruction, but also a symbol of renewal and regeneration. And, you know, really we're talking about intergenerationals, but it's also a regeneration as well in so many different ways. And finally, I just want to offer some prayers for what is happening right now in India and in Africa, around the world. This is our common human experience right now. And we really should all be giving our attention and time and love and money and energy, everything, to ending this terrible pandemic, which has affected all of us so much. So just a few closing comments there with the river in the background here.
So Kairos, tie it all
Well,
together. Bring
here
us
we
to
are on the river.
humanity.
We're on the river. And it's so beautiful to be swimming and on the banks and maybe in a boat.
Well, I want to say the river that we're thinking of, the Mississippi River, has been before immigrants came from Europe. It was a place that people lived, fished, spent their summers, traveled freely, and it's been dammed up for many years. But there is opportunity now as people are realizing that it can start going back to how it was, where we could fish from it and eat the food and swim in it.
Mm-hmm.
And so this is a song, though, that goes back a little bit in time, where people worked really hard on that river. Do you want to give us some of those
Sure,
words?
so I just invite you to find the movement of rolling. Whatever rolling is in your body. If you want to just roll your hands, or you can just roll your fingertip, or you can roll your hips if you want to. But find your way to the river. So this is a song from John Fogerty, made famous by Miss Tina Turner. And today this is in honor of all of my grandmothers and my grandfathers who come before me. I honor your spirit on this great river. I left a good job in the city, working for the man every night and day, but I never saw the good side of the city till I hitched a ride on the riverboat queen. Whoa, big wheels keep on turning. Whoa, proud of Mary, keep on learning. And we're rolling, rolling on the river. Come on, David. Oh, we're rolling. I want to see you rolling. Yeah, rolling. Yeah, rolling on the river. Woo! All right, dance party. Oh, I left a good job in the city, working for the man every night and day, but I never saw the good side of the city till I hitched a ride on the riverboat. We were keep that river rolling in your shoulders all day long. And may you stay connected to your community and to all of us. Thank you so much.
Everyone. Thanks, Peter. Thanks, everyone.
Thank you.
Thanks all.
So much. Thank you, Violetta.
Thank you, everyone.
That was fun. Let's do it again soon.
Yes. Super.